Good day, grade 11 students, and welcome to Earth Science. Ngayong araw, we're going to start our second quarter. Just a short recap of our first quarter. Kung matatandaan ninyo, we discussed the topics such as the different characteristics of the Earth that make the Earth unique, a unique planet. Another thing is we discuss the different Earth materials, such as we differentiate the minerals and rocks, the three types of rocks, and then the different types of minerals, as well as we discuss the different properties of rocks and minerals. We also discuss the different resources that we have, such as the non-renewable, the renewable, the geothermal, and then the hydroelectric, etc. So for today, we're going to start, or today we're going to start our second quarter. So the that we're going to discuss for our second quarter is what we call as the Earth processes. Under this unit, we'll be discussing the Melc number 15, or to describe how rocks undergo weathering. With that, the lesson is all about weathering, the physical, biological, and then the chemical weathering. We also have the different specific objectives that we're going to discuss in this video lesson. The first one is to describe what is weathering phenomenon, enumerate the different types of weathering, and determine the importance of weathering on Earth. So before we go to the different types of weathering and the definition of weathering, let's start discussing what are the different Earth processes. There are two types of Earth processes, the exogenic and then the endogenic process. When I say exogenic, it is a geologic process that occur on the surface of the Earth, and endogenic is the geologic process that occur within the Earth. From the term exo, which means outside, and endo, which means inside. When I say exogenic process, these are different processes na nagaganap on the surface of the Earth. And endogenic, different processes na nagaganap inside the Earth. Now, for us to understand that these different processes, let's have the following examples. So let us classify whether these examples are exogenic or endogenic. Let's start with mass wasting. The common term for mass wasting is landslide. So mass wasting, landslide, exogenic or endogenic? It is exogenic. Mass wasting or landslide happens on the Earth's surface. What about weathering? Weathering on rocks happens on the surface of the Earth. It is an example of exogenic process. What about magma formation? Magma formation is an endogenic process. Remember, for us to have for magma formation to occur, kailangan natin ng high temperature. At makikita natin yung high temperature na yun, yung enough na temperature na yun, makikita natin inside the Earth's surface so that it is an endogenic process. What about erosion? Erosion, or the transfer of materials from one place to another, is an exogenic process, happens on the surface. Lastly, metamorphism. Metamorphism, if you can still remember the three types of rocks, metamorphism happens within the Earth or inside the Earth. It is an endogenic process. Remember, metamorphism, kailangan natin ng high temperature and high pressure na makikita lang natin within the Earth. So these are the two types of Earth processes. Weathering, as an example of exogenic process, happens on the surface of the Earth. When I say weathering, it is a process where rocks, soil, and minerals are broken down into pieces. We do have a compact rocks. Due to the different climate change or weather phenomenon, yung rocks ay nag-break at nagkapira-piraso, turning into sediments or turning into pieces having different sizes. This is weathering. Hindi lang siya sa rocks nagaganap, pwede rin siyang maganap sa mga minerals. Pwede rin siyang maganap sa soil, wherein, let's say, we have a compact soil. If you can still remember tilling or tillage, kapag tinitil natin yung lupa, from compact soil, nagiging buhagag siya at naghihiwa-hiwalay yung components ng soil. It is also an example of weathering. So, identify if the following is an example of weathering or not. I do have here 4 pictures. First one, second one, third one, and then the last one. Let's go to the first one. Weathering or not? The answer is, it is an example of weathering. You may notice yung rocks ay nagkaroon ng mga cracks, and then this rock will turn into pieces. What about the second picture, rock formation? Nagkaroon ng rock formation because of weathering. We'll be discussing this one. Bakit nagkaroon ng ganang rock formation dahil sa weathering? Thirdly, may mga holes dun sa rocks. It is weathering or not. It is an example of weathering. The last picture, eh, um, I think this is a pison or what we call a soil compactor. Ang soil compactor ay ginagamit natin para gawing compact yung soil para pwede tayo magtayo ng mga, let's say, um, ng mga daanan ng sasakyan. So, soil compactor, what is this? Weathering or not? It is not an example of weathering. Remember, compaction. Kinocompact yung materials. Kabaliktaran siya or opposite ng weathering. So, the following are the examples of weathering. Now, when I say weathering, it has three types: physical, chemical, and biological. Let's start discussing the physical weathering. It is sometimes called as mechanical weathering. It's a process that breaks rocks apart without changing their chemical composition. From the term physical weathering or having physical change. So kapag nag-break yung rocks into several pieces, walang pagbabago sa kanyang chemical composition. Ang nag-change lang ay yung physical structure niya. In short, nag-change lang yung size ng materials. So physical weathering or mechanical weathering. Let's go to the examples. The first one is the frost wedging. Water enters into the cracks within the rocks. During night, temperature drops and water freezes. Ice formation within cracks may cause rock to break apart. So, paano kaya nakakaapekto ang ice formation sa weathering or the frost wedging? Let's say, yung rock, sometimes meron siyang cracks. Sometimes meron siyang holes. And let's say during the night, before during the night, sometimes umuulan or nagkakaroon ng moisture. So yung water naiipon siya within the cracks or dun sa inside the holes. So during the night, yung temperature ay nagda-drops. Ang tendency ng water ay mag-freeze. Remember, kapag yung water ay nag-freeze, siya ay nag-expand. So kapag nag-expand yung ice sa loob ng mga cracks, may tendency na i-push niya yung bato at magkapira-piraso siya. Makikita natin to kapag gumagawa tayo ng yelo. So sa plastic naglalagay tayo ng water at nilalagay natin sa refrigerator. As time pass by, yung water ay nagfe-freeze. Kung mapapansin natin, nag-e-expand siya dun sa lalagyanan. So bakit ba nag-e-expand ang ice kapag siya ay nagfe-freeze or kapag nagkakaroon ng ice formation? Let's have this illustration. Doon sa unang picture, makikita natin na randomly arrange yung molecules ng water. The molecules of water is H2O, having 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Kung makikita natin randomly arrange yung water, ibig sabihin wala siyang pattern na sinusundan. Kapag nag-drop yung temperature, nagkakaroon ng ice formation. Look at the second picture. Yung water, yung ice or yung water molecule na randomly arranged ay nagkakaroon ng formation. They start to expand. And then as time pass by, look at the third illustration, nagkaroon siya ng hexagonal molecular structure. Let's have a closer look. Dun sa unang illustration natin, randomly arranged yung formation ng water molecules natin. Kapag nagkaroon ng ice formation, kung makikita natin, ina-arrange na yung sarili niya into this hexagonal molecular crystal structure. At kung mapapansin natin, nagkaroon siya ng more spaces habang siya ay nagkakaroon ng ganitong structure. So, ito yung reason bakit yung water ay nag-e-expand kapag siya ay nagkakaroon ng ice formation. This physical weathering is what we call frost wedging. The second one is what we call the thermal expansion. So during the day, temperature side heating rocks and ground. As they heat up, expansion occurs. During the night, temperatures drop and the rocks and the land lose their heat. This causes contraction. Balikan natin yung ating knowledge about the molecules or about atoms. Let's say, kapag mataas yung temperature, what will happen to the atoms or to the molecules? They will expand. So kapag tumataas ang temperature or nagiging mainit yung environment, ang tendency ng molecules natin ay mag-expand. Kabaligtaran naman kapag nagkaroon ng mababang temperature. So kapag mababa naman yung temperature, ang tendency naman ng mga molecules natin ay mag-contract. Nagko-contract kapag malamig, nag-expand kapag umiinit. So what is this thermal expansion at paano nagkakaroon ng weathering using this? So let's have this one. So let's say we do have here a rock. Tingnan natin yung unang illustration. So, ang temperature is 40 Celsius. Dun sa ating 40 Celsius, ang tendency nung mga molecules ng rocks ay mag-expand. During the night naman, we have a 0 Celsius, ibig sabihin napakalamig. Ang tendency naman ng rocks ay mag-contracts. So, paulit-ulit na expansion at contraction, may tendency na ganito yung mangyari sa rocks. Habang siya ay nag-expand at nagko-contract at paulit-ulit na nagaganap yon, may tendency na yung kanyang outside layer ay mag-peel away. Ibig sabihin, may tendency na yung kanyang outside layer ay magkaroon ng exfoliation or nagpipeel away yung outside layer dahil sa paulit-ulit na contraction at expansion. Napupush na kasi yung outside layer, causing this exfoliation. This is what you call as the thermal expansion. Meron tayong simple illustration ng thermal expansion. Let's say sa mga kalsada natin. Kung makikita natin yung kalsada natin, meron siyang mga joints, yung mga lines na yan. The reason na meron siyang mga joints is kasi nagkakaroon ng thermal expansion itong mga rocks or itong composition ng mga daanan natin. So kapag sobrang init, nag-e-expand sila. Kapag malamig, bumabalik or nagko-contract. Kung makikita natin, ano ba yung purpose ng mga joints na yan? These are actually spaces na kung saan kapag nagkaroon ng expansion, itong mga rocks na to, meron silang spaces kasi kung hindi natin sila lalagyan ng spaces, may tendency na magkaroon ng collision at mag-break yung daanan natin. Kaya nilalagyan nila ng joints or spaces for the expansion. And may mga countries na gumagamit nito. These are what we call as steel expansion joint. This is ang innovation na kapag nag-expand yung ating daanan itong mga joint na to ay magko-collide. So para maiwasan yung pagka-crack ng mga daanan natin or daanan ng mga sasakyan. Ang thermal expansion, pwede rin siyang maganap sa ngipin natin. Kapag nasasanay tayo na umiinom ng mainit na tubig, pagkatapos iinom tayo ng malamig na tubig, may tendency na yung ngipin natin ay magkaroon ng expansion at contraction at mag-exfoliate yung outside layer niya, yung mag-peel away. This thermal expansion contributes to weathering. Nagkakaroon ng exfoliation ang mga rocks. The last example of physical weathering is what you call as the abrasion. Kung mapapansin natin na say abrasion, in Tagalog, ibig sabihin pagkakaroon ng gas-gas. It occurs when rock surface is frequently exposed to water, wind, and gravity. Rocks and sediment grinding against each other, wear away surfaces. Now, let's have a different example of abrasion. Sabi sa definition, nagkakaroon ng grinding or nagkakagasgasan yung mga materials, causing them to break or mag-turn into several pieces kasi nagkakaroon ng collision. Now, the first example is this, sa mga glaciers natin. So, yung glaciers natin sa top ng mountains, sometimes kapag nagbabago yung temperature, nagkakaroon ng different weather phenomenon such as, let's say, tumaas yung temperature, naging mainit, ang tendency ng mga glaciers natin ay matunaw at lumagpak doon sa bottom nung ating mountains. Due to the force of gravity, itong mga glaciers na to ay tuluyang nagta-travel papunta sa baba ng mountain. Now, habang natutunaw yung glaciers at nagmo-move downslope siya, may tendency na magkaroon ng grinding or kinakaskas niya yung surface ng mountain, creating this striations. So that is smooth yung mountains dahil sa abrasion ng glaciers, nagasgasan siya. Or yung ibang materials ng bato ay na-weather or nag-turn into several pieces. Now, the second example of abrasion is through wind. So sometimes yung wind ay meron siyang daladalang mga buhangin. So itong mga buhangin na to, pwede itong magkaroon ng collision dun sa mga bato. Siyempre, itong mga buhangin na to, kapag tiningnan natin sa microscope, ay medyo meron siyang mga edgy or mga jagged layers or jagged surface. So habang kumikiskisa sa mga bato at dinadala siya ng hangin, ang tendency yung rocks ay parang nagkakaroon ng abrasion na nagagasgasan siya. Tendency lumiliit siya ng lumiliit dahil sa pagtama ng mga sand na dala-dala ng wind. This is the reason bakit nagkakaroon ng ganitong formation dahil sa wind, sa abrasion ng mga sand na dala-dala ng hangin. Thirdly is this, by means of water. So si water sa river, sometimes yung mga maliliit na bato ay dinadala niya from one place to another. Look at the illustration here. So ano bang pwede mangyari dun sa mga bato? Dati yung bato ay meron siya mga edgy layer. Matutulis yung surface niya. Dahil sa patuloy na pagdaloy ng water, itong mga batong to ay nawe-weather yung surface niya. Ang tendency, yung bato ay namamold siya at nagkakaroon siya ng smooth surface. Ang reason why bakit yung mga pebbles natin ay meron mga rounded structure, almost round, is dahil sa abrasion ng water. So these are the three types of physical weathering. So we have the frost wedging, the thermal, and then the abrasion. Let's go with chemical weathering. In the chemical weathering changes the molecular structure of rocks and soil. Meaning, kapag daw nagkakaroon ng chemical weathering, yung composition ng rocks, aside from nawe-weather siya, nagta-turn into several pieces, yung rocks ay nagkakaroon ng pagbabago sa kanyang chemical composition or nagkakaroon ng chemical change. Let's go to the example of chemical weathering. The first one is the dissolution. Minerals from rocks are dissolved through time. So from the term dissolution, dissolve. Nadi-dissolve daw yung mga bato. A very good example is acid rain. Look at this illustration. Using a chemical, what we call as acid rain, as time pass by yung mga statue natin, kaya siya nagde-degrade, is gawa ng acid rain. So, through acid rain, dinidissolve niya yung mga minerals sa matatagpuan sa mga statues na to at nagkakaroon ng degradation. At may tendency na madurog itong mga statues na to. Look at this one. Another example of dissolution. Si water, pwede rin siya mag-create ng dissolution since water is a universal solvent. Another example of dissolution aside from acid rain and water itself is the carbonation. When I say carbonation, it's the process of mixing water with carbon dioxide to make carbonic acid. If you're familiar with carbonic acid, ito yung present sa ating mga soft drinks. Yung soft drinks natin, it is a combination of water and carbon dioxide, creating carbonic acid. Si carbonic acid, it is a type of weak acid, pero meron pa rin siyang ability na mag-dissolve ng mga minerals. Look at this one. This rock formation. Due to the mixing of water with carbon dioxide, creating carbonic acid. Si carbonic acid, once na mapunta siya sa mga rocks na to, may tendency na ma-dissolve niya yung mga minerals, creating this holes formation, this rock formation. Another example is this, cave formation ay example ng dissolution. Dahil sa carbonic acid, sometimes dun sa loob ng cave ay merong moisture. Yung moisture, kapag yun ay nag-mix kay carbon dioxide, that will create chemical reaction, creating carbonic acid. Si carbonic acid, pwede niyang i-dissolve yung mga minerals na nandoon. A very good example ay mga carbonate. Kung matatandaan niyo yung mga types ng minerals na meron tayo. Si carbonate ay mabilis ma-dissolve ng carbonic acid. Due to that, nagkakaroon ng cave formation or nagkakaroon ng mga holes dun sa loob ng mga mountains or sa loob ng mga rock formation at nagkakaroon ng cave formation. This is an example of dissolution. The second example of chemical weathering is the oxidation. Oxidation is also known as rusting, wherein it is a reaction of substance with oxygen. So, oxidation are also known as rusting. Kung papansin natin, itong mga metals na to, let's say they are composed of iron. Ang iron ay mabilis nagre-react kay oxygen. Kapag nagkaroon sila ng chemical reaction, they will create iron oxide. Si iron oxide ay merong orange na color. Ito yung tinatawag nating rusting or oxidation. Kaya the reason why bakit natin pinipintahan yung mga iron, let's say meron tayong bagong gate, pinipinturahan natin siya is para magkaroon ng barrier kay oxygen. So, nilalagyan natin siya ng paint para hindi magre-react yung oxygen sa kanya. Another way is through galvanization. Ginagalvanize natin yung metals. When I say galvanization, nilalagyan natin siya ng outer covering. Covering such as nilalagyan natin siya ng zinc. Ang zinc is a metal, pero matagal siyang nagre-react kay oxygen. In short, matagal siya nagre-rust or matagal nagkakaroon ng oxidation. So kino-cover natin ng zinc yung mga metals na meron tayo. Without paint and zinc, mabilis nag-o-oxidize yung mga metals. Ang oxidation na hindi lang sa mga metals nag-o-occur. Pwede rin siyang mag-occur sa mga rocks natin. Ang mga rocks natin ay meron ding mga metallic minerals such as iron din. So itong iron na to, once na ma-expose sila, ay magre-react sila kay oxygen, creating rusting. Kung makita natin yung illustration dito, yung mga rocks ay nag-turn sa orange or red color. Marami tayong nakikita nito sa paligid natin na yung bato ay nagre-rust or nagiging orange or nagiging red. That's what we call as oxidation, reacting with oxygen. So kapag yung metal ay nag-react kay oxygen, so our example a while ago is the iron oxide. Si iron oxide ay napaka-weak na substance, meaning mabilis siyang nagkakadurog-durog. So yung iron na matibay, na hard, kapag nag-react kay oxygen, ay nagtuturn into a weaker substance. So dito na nag-o-occur yung weathering. Itong mga batong to na merong iron, kapag nag-oxidize siya, yung iron magte-turn siya into a weaker substance, creating weathering or magkakapira-piraso itong mga rocks na to. So, umakyat kami sa Tayak, meron doon mga excavation. So, habang ina-excavate nila yung land ina-expose yung mga metallic minerals na meron siya, such as iron. Nung na-expose yung iron, nagkaroon siya ng oxidation, nag-react sa oxygen, at nag-turn into a weaker substance, creating weathering at tuluyan siyang nagkapira-piraso. This is what we call as oxidation, a chemical weathering. Lastly is the hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is when a substance combines with water and a chemical breakdown occurs. An example is when water comes in contact with granite and the substance inside the granite called feldspar reacts with the water to form clay. Hydrolysis or the reaction with water. A very good example of hydrolysis is feldspar. Si feldspar ay makikita sa granite rock. Kung matatandaan nyo, granite is an example of an igneous rock. Yung mga color orange, those are the feldspar. Those are the mineral feldspar. Si feldspar ay nag-undergo ng hydrolysis. Now, wherein, kapag nag-combine yung water sa kanya, nagkakaroon ng chemical reaction. Si feldspar, kapag nag-combine kay water, ay magte-turn into a weaker substance, what we call as kaolinite, or also known as white clay. Si feldspar is a strong mineral. Pero nung nahaluan siya ng water, nagkaroon ng chemical reaction, turning into a white clay, what we call as kaolinite. Si kaolinite ay weak mineral na kung saan mabilis siyang nagwe-weather or mabilis siyang nagkakapira-piraso. This is hydrolysis, the reaction with water. A good example is feldspar. So those are the chemical weathering. Last one is the biological weathering, wherein occurs when rocks are weakened by different biological agents such as plants and animals. At this point naman, hindi wind, hindi gravity Hindi mga chemical substances yung nagkakos ng weathering. Ang nagkakos ng weathering at this point ay plants, human, and animals. Let's go to the biological weathering. So occurs when something living interacts with weathering. Our examples here is this. So biological weathering by physical means. Example ay roots ng trees. So yung roots ng trees, meron siyang physical strength na kapag tumubo siya, sometimes yung kanyang roots pwede niyang ma-break yung mga rocks. Sometimes kapag tumubo yung stem, pwede rin niyang i-break yung rocks using its physical strength. This is biological weathering by physical means. Another example is yung mga moles at mga earthworms, may tendency na yung soil ay gawin nilang buhaghag. So, compact yung soil. Habang nagkikreate sila ng mga holes, yung soil ay nagiging less compact. Or, natitil nila yung soil at nagta-turn into a less dense substance. So, it is also an example of biological weathering. Second is this, biological weathering by chemical means. If you're familiar with lichens, si lichens is a combination of fungus and algae. Makikita sila sometimes sa mga trees, sometimes makikita sila nakadikit sa mga bato katulad doon nasa illustration. Si lichens na nakadikit sa mga bato ay nagkakreate ng oxalic acid. It is an organic acid. Si oxalic acid ay merong ability na i-dissolve yung mga minerals dun sa mga bato. So, imagine this, yung mga minerals na nandun sa loob ng bato, kapag siya ay na-dissolve ng oxalic acid, may tendency na magkapira-piraso itong mga rocks na to. Actually, meron pong magandang binibigay sa environment natin. Kasi si lichens, pinopulverize na yung rocks, tineturn niya into sediments. Si lichens ay isa sa mga organism na merong ability na i-turn ang rocks into nutritious soil. So si lichens using its oxalic acid, nagagawa niyang soil, nutritious soil, yung rocks using its oxalic acid. Thirdly is human activity. So indirectly, meron tayong kinokos na biological weathering. Such as when we hike or when we walk, habang nag-hike tayo, habang lumalakad tayo or nag-run, may tendency na maapakan natin yung mga bato sa paligid natin. So kapag naapakan natin sila, magbe-break yung rocks, that is biological weathering. Ang pagmamine ay isa sa human activities na nagkikreate ng biological weathering. So yung mga rocks, yung mga compact soil, ina-excavate natin sila, dinudurog natin sila. Sometimes we're using bombs para mabilis na excavation. Those human activities are also example of biological weathering. And lastly, let's talk about the different importance of weathering. Although, yung rocks ay nagbe-break, pero merong magandang kine-create ang weathering sa atin. Firstly, formation of soil. Our example a while ago is lichens. Si lichens na pinopulverize yung soil, yung rocks para mag-turn into sand or mag-turn into soil. And actually, itong mga soil na kine-create ng lichens is very nutritious. Kasi remember, ang rocks ay napakaraming minerals. Yung mga minerals na yon ay kailangan ng mga plants. Another way is the thermal expansion. Ang thermal expansion ay mostly nag-o-occur sa desert. Kaya nagkaroon ng sand formation is yung mga rocks sa desert ay nag-undergo ng thermal expansion. Nag-contract, nag-expand pa ulit-ulit, creating exfoliation, at sometimes nagkakadurog-durog yung mga bato, turning into sand. So, formation of soil. Secondly, is the formation of this, major forces that shape the Earth's surface. Because of weathering, sinishape niya yung surface ng Earth. Because of that, nakaka-create siya ng iba't ibang landforms or nakaka-create siya ng iba't ibang rock formation na nagiging tourist spot. A very good example is this, the Grand Canyon. Second, the last one is, this is an important part of rock cycle, specifically for sedimentary rocks. Kung matatandaan nyo, ang sedimentary rocks para siya ma-form ay kailangan natin ng weathering and erosion. Let's say we do have an igneous rock, a metamorphic rock, a sedimentary rocks. Kapag itong mga rocks na to ay nag-undergo ng weathering, nag-turn into several pieces. naging mga sediments. Using erosion, dadalhin sila sa bodies of water. Bodies of water has pressure. Using the pressure, gagawin yung compact yung mga sediments. Using the natural cements, um, using the natural cements, temporarily, pagdidikit-dikitin niya yung mga sediments, creating sedimentary rocks. That's why weathering is an important part of the rock cycle, specifically for the sedimentary rocks formation. So let us summarize our discussion about weathering. So weathering is a breaking down of rocks, and we have the three types of weathering: the physical, chemical, and biological weathering. For the physical weathering, we have discussed the frost wedging, wherein through ice formation, nagkakaroon ng breaking ng rocks. Another one is the thermal expansion, wherein um, um, through expansion and contraction, nagkakaroon ng exfoliation or nagpipil away yung outside layer ng rocks. The third one is the abrasion, wherein by means of wind, water, and gravity, nagkakaroon ng pagkagasgas yung surface ng rocks. Such as our examples are yung glaciers na kapag natutunaw, hinihila siya ng gravity pababa at nagka-create ng grinding dun sa surface ng mountains. Another one is the yung wind na may daladalang sand na nagka-create ng abrasion dun sa surface ng mga rocks. Thirdly, our last example for abrasion is yung flowing water sa river na kung saan yung mga pieces of rocks na merong edgy surface na habang dinadala siya ng water ay nagkakaroon ng abrasion sa surface niya, tendency nagiging makinis yung surface at nagiging almost round yung mga rocks na meron tayo sa river. Chemical weathering, we have discussed the site dissolution, wherein they dissolve yung rocks by means of water, acid, such as acid rain or carbonic acid. Oxidation, wherein yung minerals, yung metallic minerals sa rocks ay nagre-react kay oxygen, creating a weaker structure para mabilis siya mag-weather. Hydrolysis, our example is feldspar reacting with water, creating a weaker substance called white clay. And the biological weathering can be by means of physical means, roots of trees, earthworms, molds, by means of chemical means such as the organic acid created by lichens, human activities such as mining, running, hiking, etc. Then the different importance of weathering, the soil formation, it also helps the rock cycle, such as the formation of sedimentary rocks, and it shapes the earth, creating a land formation or rock formation. So that's our milk for 15 about weathering. See you next time in our next discussion about earth science.